All right, guys, let's keep going with our 8 steps for cardiovascular program design. So step number 3 is going to be setting goals for your client. We want to make sure that those goals are SMART, and SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and then time-based as well. Something to think about is not making weight loss goals in the first 8 weeks for your clients. We want to focus on things that they're going to make an impact on their overall daily life. As you have seen throughout the semester with our metabolic equations, it is very difficult to burn calories when we're working with a client that has to exercise at such a low MET level. Most sedentary clients will begin exercise at a MET level of somewhere between 3 and 4 METs. We know someone exercising at 3 to 4 METs, depending on their weight, is not going to burn very many calories for those 30 minutes that they're exercising. Maybe 100 to 200 calories max. So those are very, very low caloric expenditure when we know that it's 3,500 calories to burn 1 pound. Okay, so let's really try to focus on things that are going to make an impact on their daily life, short-term goal that is going to start to build those healthy habits for them that ultimately will get them to their weight loss goals. So some examples would be to cook a few meals at home, to become more consistent with exercising at least 3 days a week, to increase their number of steps taken per day. Okay, so again, no weight loss goals in the first 8 weeks for clients, and then long-term goals can be more weight loss centered. So let's talk about some specific examples of a goal that would be on those SMART goals, those kind of hitting specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and then time-based. So an example of a short-term goal would be Sally will log her food intake into MyFitnessPal app every day for 1 week. We will revisit this goal in 1 week's time. Now let's just talk about your scope of practice briefly as a personal trainer. You are absolutely allowed to have a client log their food or journal their food for a week and for you to look at it and say, Sally, I noticed that on Wednesday you had ice cream at 9 p.m. Probably not the best and healthiest choice, right, Sally? You are not allowed to recommend a specific diet plan that says, here are your macronutrients. This is how much protein, fats, and carbs that you need to be eating every week. Unless you have a specific nutrition certification or something like that, or become a registered dietitian, those specific, getting into real specific things like that is outside the scope of your practice as a trainer. It is very eye-opening for people to log their food for a week, even 3 or 4 days. So that's a great thing to have a client do, to food journal or to use some apps as well. MyFitnessPal is a really great one. Another example of a short-term goal would be Sally will start to do 1 fitness-based activity a week with her kids for at least 30 minutes. Some examples of that may include family walks, bike rides, family hikes, playing soccer. We will revisit this goal in 3 weeks' time. So trying to get some more activity into Sally's life would be a great idea. Okay, and then a long-term goal would be Sally will lose 5 pounds in 3 months' time, assuming that would be attainable based on Sally's current weight and her fitness level. Okay, which again, we'll get into more information as we go through case studies on that. Step number 4 is determining your client's cardiovascular assessment scores. So some clients may have had a VO2 max test and come to you with that information. So you're going to just want to say where they rated. Were they above average, below average? And then what numbers were you given? Were you given their heart rate max? Were you given any information about that? If not, then obviously we know that we're going to do the best we can and use the heart rate max calculation of 220 minus their age. Step number 5 is going to be determine their heart rate reserve levels. So most of the time we're going to start out finding 50% of heart rate reserve and 85% of heart rate reserve for clients. So that's going to be a low versus a high intensity exercise. As we design the client's program, specific program, later in step 6, 7, and 8, you will notice that we may change those heart rate intensities a little bit. But in general, we always start out finding that 50 and 85%. And then here is an example of how to determine heart rate reserve. So if we had a client that had a max heart rate of 175 beats per minute and their resting heart rate was 75, we would take 175, subtract 75, and get 100 beats per minute as their heart rate reserve. Then we want to find 50% and 85% of their heart rate reserve. So we take the 100, which is their heart rate reserve, multiply that by 0.5, which we get 50. We add back in their resting heart rate of 75 to get a total of 125 beats per minute at that 50% range. Do the exact same thing for 85%, and then we would get 160. Okay. If you have questions about that math, please let us know. Same math we've been doing pretty much all semester. Step number 6 is going to be using the ACSM table 7.4 to determine what category your client will fall into and make recommendations from there. So this is the ACSM table 7.4, and this is posted in Canvas for you as well. But the idea here really is to determine with your client what habitual physical activity or exercise level they fall into. You have 5 options, so sedentary, minimal, sporadic, habitual, and then high amounts. The next column will be their physical fitness classification. So are they in poor physical fitness, poor to fair, fair to average, average to good, or good to excellent. We also added in this column here, which is the stage of conditioning. Again, we said there are 3 stages of conditioning: initial, improvement, and then maintenance. For us, we're going to be really concerned about the frequency or number of days a week a client can exercise. We're going to pay attention to this first column in intensity here, which is going to be their percentage of heart rate reserve, the time or duration per day of exercise, and then in volume, realistically, most of us are going to look at that weekly duration in minutes. Okay? So we're going to use that table 7.4 to determine where our client will fall. Remember, you have your MET chart as well. That was on that back of that handout that we gave you when we did metabolic equations. So a variety of different exercises determining the MET level that we will put your client into. Okay? We will use a 2-week chart to then determine kind of the specifics for our client and where we are going to put them and how we are going to plan a program for them, how we would progress them from week 1 into week 2. And I am going to do a specific case study with you guys in the next screencast. So you will get a ton of information about how you would fill out this for a specific case study example. Step number 7 is to think about some considerations for your client. To think about if your case study makes sense or if your program that you gave this client makes sense. So remember, variety is the key of life, right? So spice things up. You don't want to walk on a treadmill 5 days a week in a row, and neither does your client. It's not healthy for them to be walking on a treadmill 5 days a week. We want them to have more variety, especially a new client. All of that impact on a treadmill with their orthopedic challenges is not ideal. Okay, that leads into the next example with orthopedic concerns. Should your client be doing weight-bearing exercise every day? Some great non-weight-bearing activities are using the elliptical, riding a bike, doing water aerobics, swimming, right? So those are all cardiovascular in nature that don't deal with weight-bearing or contact or impact-based exercise. Okay. Try not to give your client more than 2 days off in a row to make sure that their workout schedule works with their daily life as well, right? We don't want our client to only exercise 3 days a week, and that to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they don't exercise from Thursday again until the following Monday, right? We never want more than 2 days off in a row. A 10% increase is what's recommended from week to week for a client. We need to build that base for our client. So like we said, in that initial stage of conditioning that can last up to 6 weeks, and even into the improvement stage, we're going to work with building that base for that client. Do they have a good base of cardiovascular exercise? Can they exercise at a fairly significant intensity level for 30 minutes or more without dying at the end, right? We want to change the intensities of exercise as well for your clients. So don't just give them, all right, we're going to go for 30 minutes and go for a bike ride. Now, when your client is in the initial stage of conditioning, that very well may be the case in what you give them. But when we're in that improvement phase, let's start to mix it up. Let's give them 1 day of maybe HIIT training intervals. Then maybe 2 days later, they're doing just a long and slow workout of a lower intensity, right? So change it up. Don't just make them do the same thing every time. And then think about group exercise classes or outside activities. Group exercise classes are huge. And you know, it's a really great way to make 45 to 60 minutes go by pretty quickly for a client. Especially something that's cardiovascular in nature. The cycling classes are great. Zumba was really big, although it's kind of not as big anymore. But that was a dance class. Cardio kickboxing classes are fairly big still. So anything that's going to get your client's heart rate up and keep it up during that time, and that might be a little bit fun or different for them, kind of think about that. And then step 8 is going to be reassess your client every 8 to 12 weeks. So how has your client progressed, and what changes will you make in order to continue to progress your client? Some examples of things that you might want to think about is if your client came to you and said, my doctor gave me 3 months to lower my blood pressure, or else I'm going to have to go on blood pressure medication. Okay, that actually happens a lot and very often. So think about what you could report back to the client's doctor. What necessary lifestyle changes have they been making? If they're coming to see you for blood pressure, you surely should be taking their resting blood pressure once a week when you're seeing them at least. Can you report back any weight loss? What about circumference measurements? Any dietary changes that they made? Have they increased their overall active or activity minutes of exercise a week? Are they spending more time exercising than they were 3 months ago when they came to see you, right? So think about how you would reassess them, and some things that you would report back to their doctor. Great reassessment for people is to literally have them do the same workout that they did on day 1 when they came to see you, and then have them repeat it 3 months later. So 12 weeks later, have them repeat it and see what their heart rate was during workout on day 1 and during the same workout 3 months later. Now, obviously, hopefully your client has increased their cardiovascular health, and that their heart rate is much, much lower during that second time that they're going to be repeating the exercise, because the exercise has now become very easy to them because they have built that base and they're able to exercise a bit more intensely. Okay, so those are your 8 steps for cardiovascular program design. Make sure you watch the first screencast regarding medical clearance and those first 2 steps. And I will go over specifics with a specific case study with you guys in the next video so that you know exactly how to create a 2-week program for a client.